You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's early morning. You're standing in your bathroom, maybe just out of the shower, and without even thinking about it, your hand goes there, right to your midsection. You grab it. That same layer of fat that has been sitting in the exact same place for years. Completely unimpressed by every diet you've tried, every early morning walk, every week where you were genuinely disciplined about what you ate, and it is still there, looking back at you, unbothered. And here's the part that makes it feel worse than just a cosmetic frustration. You've read enough to know that this particular fat, the deep belly fat, the kind that wraps around your organs rather than sitting just beneath your skin, is different from the fat everywhere else on your body. You know it's connected to your blood sugar, your blood pressure, your energy levels, your risk for type 2 diabetes, heart disease, metabolic syndrome. You know this is not just about how you look in a t-shirt at the beach. This is about how your body is functioning at the most fundamental level. And yet, nothing has moved it. Not significantly. Not in any way that lasted. So when someone mentions intermittent fasting, a coworker, a podcast, your doctor's assistant who brought it up almost as an afterthought, a part of you is interested. And another part of you is already bracing for disappointment. Because you have been here before. You have tried the thing. You have done the research. You have started and restarted enough times to be deeply skeptical of anything that sounds too clean. Here is what I want you to know right now, before we go any further. Your skepticism is appropriate. Your frustration is biologically justified. And the reason that belly fat has resisted everything you have thrown at it is not a personal failure. It is a mechanistic one. Your belly fat, specifically the visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat surrounding your organs, does not respond to the same biological signals as the fat on your hips, your thighs, or your arms. It has its own hormonal environment, its own inflammatory behavior, its own defense mechanisms that conventional dieting, calorie counting, and even consistent exercise simply do not address at the root level. What intermittent fasting does, when you understand the actual science and not the Instagram version, is speak directly to that root level. It changes the hormonal conditions that allowed visceral fat to accumulate in the first place. And that distinction between addressing symptoms and addressing root causes is the entire difference between approaches that produce lasting results and approaches that produce temporary fluctuations on a scale. Stay with me through the next 20 minutes. Because the hour-by-hour breakdown I'm about to walk you through, what is actually happening inside your body during a fast, is not what most people expect. And understanding it is the difference between people who see real results and people who quit in week 2 because they think something is wrong, when in fact, their body is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. Let's start with the molecule that controls everything. Because if you want to understand why belly fat accumulates, why it resists ordinary dieting, and why the timing of your eating matters more than almost any other dietary variable, you need to understand insulin at a level deeper than most health content goes. Insulin is a hormone produced by your pancreas in response to rising blood glucose. Every time you eat, whether it's a meal, a snack, a protein bar between meetings, a handful of nuts while standing at the kitchen counter, your blood glucose rises and your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin's job is to signal your cells to absorb that glucose, either for immediate energy use or for storage. This is a completely normal, essential biological process. Insulin is not your enemy. Without it, you could not survive. The problem is not insulin itself. The problem is the eating pattern that most Americans have lived inside for their entire adult lives. Eating from the moment they wake up until close to the time they go to sleep. Often, every 2 to 3 hours, with almost no extended periods where the body has a genuine break from incoming food. In this pattern, insulin is chronically, persistently elevated. Not at dangerous levels, just consistently higher than it would be if the body had regular, extended recovery windows without food. And chronically elevated insulin has one specific consequence that matters above all others when it comes to visceral belly fat. It keeps your body locked in storage mode. Specifically, insulin suppresses lipolysis, the process by which your fat cells release stored fatty acids into circulation to be burned as energy. When insulin is elevated, your fat cells receive a signal that translates at the biochemical level to this: we have incoming fuel. Hold your reserves. Do not release. Your body is perpetually choosing to burn the food you just ate rather than mobilizing the fat you stored weeks or months ago. And visceral belly fat, because of where it is located and the density of its insulin receptors, is particularly responsive to this lock. When insulin goes up, visceral fat locks down. When insulin falls and stays low for a meaningful extended period, visceral fat is among the first depots to begin releasing stored energy. This is the core mechanism of intermittent fasting, not the calorie reduction that often comes with it, not the specific foods you eat or avoid. The mechanism is the extended low insulin window, creating a consistent period, long enough and frequent enough, where insulin stays genuinely low, lipolysis activates, and your body begins running on its stored fat rather than its most recent meal. The length of that window determines how deeply into fat stores your body reaches, and the specific timeline is more precise than most people realize. Here is the hour-by-hour breakdown of what is actually happening inside your body during a standard 16 to 8 intermittent fasting day. 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of eating. This is the most widely researched protocol, the most practically sustainable for most Americans, and the right starting point for understanding the biology. Hours 0 through 4 after your last meal. Your blood glucose rises and begins falling as insulin clears it from circulation. Your body is still in what physiologists call the post-absorptive state, processing and distributing nutrients from your last meal. Insulin is falling, but still meaningfully elevated. Your fat cells are not yet in significant release mode. This is completely normal. Nothing remarkable is happening here yet. This is just what happens after any meal, whether you are fasting or not. Hours 4 through 8. Insulin continues declining. Your liver, which stores glucose in a compact form called glycogen, begins releasing that stored glucose back into your bloodstream to maintain blood sugar as insulin falls and no new carbohydrates are arriving. Your body is still running primarily on glucose at this point, now sourced from your liver's glycogen reserves rather than from food. This is still not the stage where something uniquely different is happening compared to a normal night of sleep. Hours 8 through 12. This is where the metabolic picture starts to shift. Your liver glycogen stores are becoming substantially depleted. Insulin has fallen to a genuinely low baseline. Your body is beginning its transition from running primarily on glucose to running increasingly on fat. Hormone-sensitive lipase, the enzyme inside your fat cells responsible for breaking down stored triglycerides and releasing fatty acids, becomes progressively more active as insulin's suppressive influence continues to decline. Your fat cells begin releasing fatty acids into circulation. Your liver begins converting some of those fatty acids into ketone bodies, alternative fuel molecules that your brain, heart, and skeletal muscle can use efficiently in place of glucose. You are entering what researchers call the metabolic switch, the shift from sugar burning to fat burning as your body's dominant mode. Hours 12 through 16. This is the window that separates intermittent fasting from simply having a long sleep. By hour 12 to 14, circulating ketone bodies are measurably rising in your bloodstream. Norepinephrine, your body's primary fat-mobilizing signaling molecule, is elevated, and visceral belly fat is particularly dense with the adrenergic receptors that respond to norepinephrine. Growth hormone, which both promotes fat oxidation and protects muscle mass from being broken down for fuel, increases significantly during this extended fasting period. And autophagy, the cellular cleanup process that has become one of the most compelling areas of fasting research since the 2016 Nobel Prize was awarded for its discovery, begins to be meaningfully activated around the 16 to 18-hour mark. This is the window most people never reach. Most Americans eat breakfast within an hour of waking, and the last bite of food comes within 2 hours of sleep. The overnight fast is typically 7 to 9 hours. They are stopping at the 8-hour mark, the point where the metabolic switch is just beginning. They are getting none of the hours where the most significant fat mobilization, hormonal shifting, and cellular cleanup are occurring. And then they wonder why, despite eating reasonably well and exercising with some consistency, they cannot make a meaningful dent in their visceral belly fat. Now let's talk about why visceral fat is specifically resistant in a way that goes beyond the insulin story. Because understanding this is what explains why some people lose weight successfully through caloric restriction and still cannot seem to reduce their belly specifically. Visceral adipose tissue is not simply a storage depot. The research of the past 2 decades has revealed it to be a metabolically active organ in its own right. Visceral fat cells contain and continuously secrete a range of inflammatory proteins called adipokines and cytokines, including tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin-6, and resistin. These molecules do not stay in your belly. They circulate in your blood. They reach your liver, your pancreas, your cardiovascular system, and your brain. What they do when they get there is create a specific and self-reinforcing kind of damage. They promote insulin resistance. They make your cells progressively less responsive to insulin's glucose-clearing signal. Your pancreas responds by producing more insulin to compensate. More insulin means more fat storage signaling. More fat storage means more visceral fat. More visceral fat means more inflammatory cytokine secretion, which means worse insulin resistance, which means your pancreas produces even more insulin. Round and round. This is the cycle that makes visceral belly fat so resistant to ordinary caloric restriction. The fat itself is actively creating and sustaining the hormonal conditions that protect its own survival. And here is the nuance that is almost never discussed in popular health content. A 2021 study from researchers at the University of Sydney used detailed proteomics analysis, essentially mapping the full protein expression profile of visceral fat tissue during repeated fasting bouts, and found something that should reshape how we think about fasting protocols. Visceral fat, specifically, appeared to activate a preservation signaling pathway during alternate day fasting. It was reducing its release of fatty acids during the fast, while simultaneously upregulating its capacity to rapidly rebuild fat stores during the feeding window. As if it had learned to anticipate the pattern and was preparing its own defense. During the fasting window, black coffee, plain tea, and water are appropriate and do not meaningfully elevate insulin in ways that interrupt the metabolic benefits of the fast. Practically speaking, they also make the fasting window significantly more manageable for most people. A cup of black coffee at 8 in the morning, when you are 3 hours from your eating window, is not cheating. It is a physiologically compatible tool that the research supports as fasting compatible. Weeks 3 through 8. Maintain the 16 to 8 structure and add a protein focus within your eating window. Your body weight in pounds multiplied by 0.7 gives you a reasonable daily protein gram target for most active adults. Protein is the most important single dietary variable within the eating window because it is the most powerful driver of satiety, reducing the risk of overeating during the 8 hours that can otherwise partially negate the caloric benefits of the fasting period. It has the highest thermic effect of any macronutrient, meaning your body burns more energy processing protein than it does processing equivalent calories from carbohydrates or fat. And it is the primary nutritional input for preserving lean muscle mass during the fat loss process, which, as we established, is the difference between losing weight and actually getting leaner. Weeks 8 through 24. Evaluate and calibrate. If visceral fat reduction is progressing, measurable through waist circumference with a tape measure taken consistently in the same conditions, through how your clothes fit across the midsection, through energy levels, through fasting blood glucose if you monitor it, maintain the protocol. If progress has plateaued after 6 to 8 weeks of consistency, consider 2 adjustments before changing the fasting structure itself. First, audit your eating window for unconscious grazing patterns. Multiple small portions spread across the 8-hour window keep insulin elevated for most of that window, rather than allowing it to fall meaningfully between meals. 2 or 3 deliberate meals with genuine gaps between them produces better insulin dynamics than continuous eating within the permitted window. Second, consider whether resistance training is in your routine, because if it is not, adding it is almost certainly the highest return intervention available to you at this point. The combination of intermittent fasting with 3 to 4 sessions per week of progressive resistance training produces visceral fat reduction that consistently exceeds what either intervention achieves in isolation. The mechanisms are synergistic rather than simply additive. Fasting creates the hormonal environment for fat mobilization: low insulin, elevated growth hormone, elevated norepinephrine. Resistance training creates the metabolic demand that consumes the mobilized fatty acids and simultaneously builds the metabolically active lean tissue that raises your resting energy expenditure over time. You are creating both the supply and the demand simultaneously. You are not just losing fat. You are building the metabolic infrastructure that makes fat loss progressively easier to sustain. Sleep is the variable that most people with a serious interest in this topic still consistently underestimate. Consistently under 7 hours of sleep elevates cortisol, suppresses growth hormone, significantly worsens insulin sensitivity, increases ghrelin, your hunger hormone, and reduces leptin, your satiety hormone, creating a hormonal environment that works directly against every mechanism we have discussed today. Practicing intermittent fasting on a foundation of chronic sleep deprivation is working against yourself in a way that no protocol adjustment compensates for. 7 to 9 hours of consistent, quality sleep is not a luxury behavior for the metabolically serious. It is the foundational variable on which everything else depends. Stress management sits alongside sleep at this foundational level, and it is the variable that most driven, high-achieving Americans are most resistant to addressing, because addressing it requires acknowledging that their pace is unsustainable, and that acknowledgement feels like weakness in a culture that prizes relentless output. But chronic, unmanaged psychological stress, the kind that shows up as sustained elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, poor appetite regulation, and a constant sense of running behind, directly drives visceral fat deposition through the mechanisms we covered earlier, and directly undermines the fat mobilization that the fasting window is designed to create. You cannot fast your way around a stress load that is chronically activating your HPA axis. The structure supports you. The biology requires you to address the root. And what you eat within the eating window, while not requiring dietary perfection, matters more than the permissive versions of intermittent fasting advice tend to suggest. Ultra-processed foods, high in refined carbohydrates and inflammatory seed oils, promote low-grade systemic inflammation and worsen insulin sensitivity, even when consumed within a compressed eating window. They can partially undo the anti-inflammatory progress created during the fasting period. The closer your eating window moves toward whole, minimally processed foods, quality proteins, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, healthy fats from olive oil, avocado, nuts, and fatty fish, the more your dietary quality amplifies and extends the metabolic benefits of the fasting structure, rather than working against them. Here is what this looks like, projected forward over years, rather than weeks. You are practicing 16 to 8 consistently. You are hitting a reasonable protein target. You are training with weights 3 times a week. You are sleeping. You are managing what you can manage. 6 months from now, your waistline is measurably different. Not because you found a magic protocol, because you changed the hormonal environment that was maintaining the status quo. A year from now, your fasting blood glucose has improved. Your inflammatory markers have shifted. Your energy in the afternoon is different from what it was. Your relationship to food feels less reactive and more deliberate. 2 years from now, you have built enough lean tissue and sufficiently reset your insulin sensitivity that your metabolism is genuinely more efficient at burning stored fat than it was when you started. That belly fat that was looking back at you in the mirror this morning is not permanent. It is not an inevitable consequence of your age or your genetics or your schedule. It is a metabolic consequence of a hormonal environment that is entirely changeable. The research is clear on this. The mechanisms are well understood. The protocols are practical. What has been missing for most people is not the willpower or the discipline. It has been an accurate understanding of what is actually happening inside their bodies, and therefore what to actually do about it and why it will work. You now have that understanding, more completely than most people who have been practicing intermittent fasting for years without fully grasping why it works, when it works, and what conditions make it work best.